The room shimmered with golden light. Candles flickered along the white linen tables, and soft jazz curled through the air like a lullaby. I stood near the cake, Lysander's hand resting lightly at the small of my back, his touch both grounding and electric. All around us, laughter bloomed. My Aunt Dahlia raised a glass. A childhood friend snapped pictures. Even Bastian hadn't arrived yet, which meant for a fleeting moment this was mine. Our moment. It had taken 6 years, countless sacrifices, and 1,000 quiet compromises to get here. And I had promised myself just for tonight, I wouldn't think about the tension. I wouldn't think about the demands. I wouldn't think about what my family had asked me to do. But then he appeared. My father's figure sliced through the crowd like a storm cloud, his posture stiff, his eyes locked on me. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't pretending. He stopped just inches away, his voice low and vibrating with restrained rage. "We need to talk." I barely blinked. "Now you're embarrassing this family," he hissed, grabbing my arm. The air shifted. Conversations died around us like someone had cut the power. Lysander stepped in instantly. "Sir, with all due respect." But my father shoved him aside with a single hand. "Stay out of it." My cheeks flamed as the silence grew. All eyes were on us now, on the perfect bride-to-be, and the father unraveling beside her. "You selfish brat," he spat. "You owe your brother everything, this party. You don't deserve it." I opened my mouth, but the words never made it out. His hand rose. The slap rang out louder than the music ever had. My earring flew, time stalled, and my head whipped to the side. The sting bloomed fast, hot, sharp, humiliating. Gasps fluttered across the room. I heard my mother's tight and theatrical, but not surprised, not horrified, just embarrassed. Bastian, standing in the back now, laughed awkwardly and took a sip of champagne like he was watching bad theater. I straightened slowly. Lysander's voice trembled with fury beside me, his hands gently framing my face. "You just hit your daughter," he whispered, "at her own engagement." "She brought it on herself," my father snapped. "Ungrateful little girl," I didn't cry. Not then. I met his eyes and saw nothing in them worth staying for. I turned to Lysander and whispered, "Let's go." We walked out to a sea of whispers. And behind me, I left more than just a ruined evening. I left the last piece of me that wanted to belong to them. It began on a quiet Sunday morning, the kind where the house felt almost peaceful. I was visiting to drop off a photo album Sylvette had insisted I bring for some vague family slideshow. I should have known better. She called me into the kitchen with that voice syrupy, sweet, and falsely gentle, the one she reserved for favors that always came with a cost. She was stirring her coffee slowly the way she did when rehearsing Control. "You know your brother's wedding is just around the corner," she said, adjusting her necklace like she was getting ready for a board meeting instead of brunch. "And you haven't really done anything yet with the money your grandfather left you." I froze. "Because I'm saving it. For my wedding." She tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. "Well, Bastian's wedding is first, and he really wants the resort in Tulum. It would mean a lot if you let us borrow the money." "Borrow," I repeated. Before she could fake another smile, my father stepped into the doorway, folding his arms. "It's not like you're flashy Leontine. You and Lysander are low-key people. A backyard wedding would suit you just fine." I stared at them both, something cold unfurling in my chest. "You want me to downsize my future so Bastian can have beachfront fireworks? It's not about you," Sylvette snapped, dropping the softness. "Your brother is the only son. He's marrying into the Holbrooks. Their family has real influence." I blinked. What about Lysander? What about me? "You'll understand when you're older," my father said, already turning away. But I wasn't a child anymore, and I wasn't just hurt, I was insulted. That evening, Lysander found me sitting on the floor of our apartment staring at nothing. I told him everything. "You don't owe them your future," he said quietly. "They've never protected yours." nodded numb. But in my silence, a plan had already begun to form. Because there was something they had all forgotten. Something Grandfather Thorne had left behind that none of them knew still existed. The days that followed were drenched in quiet hostility. Sylvette didn't yell she never needed to. She let her silence do the work. Every phone call from a cousin was clipped. Every family group chat suddenly lit up with passive-aggressive jabs. My Aunt Coralie asked if I was still being difficult. My godmother commented how lovely it was that Bastian's future was the priority now. The subtext wasn't subtle. At Sunday dinner, Sylvette orchestrated her grand performance. She dabbed her eyes with a silk napkin and told everyone I had turned my back on family, that I was letting money come between blood. No one looked at me. They didn't have to. The verdict had already been passed. I sat across the table from Bastian, who offered me a smug shrug over his wine glass. "It's just a loan," he said. "You'll still have your wedding. Just smaller." I looked to my father. Nothing. Not a glance. Not a word. Only Lysander squeezed my knee gently under the table, a silent reminder that I wasn't crazy, that I didn't imagine how small they were trying to make me feel. I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue. I let them finish their little play. When dessert was served, I excused myself, kissed no one, and left without looking back. That night, I returned to our apartment and walked straight to the antique chest beneath my bookshelf. I hadn't touched it in years. I slid the drawer open and pulled out a leather folder, one I hadn't dared show anyone, not even Lysander, until now. Inside, the original deed to my parents' home. Grandpa Thorne's signature, a notarized transfer, my name. He had done it in secret 2 years before he passed. He'd told me cryptically, "Someday they'll forget you're their daughter. When they do, you'll need something to remind them who you are." Back then, I thought it was sentiment, a poetic gesture. Now I saw it clearly for what it was, a warning, a weapon, and most of all, proof. I closed the folder, locking it again, but not for long, because tomorrow I'd be making a call. I remembered the exact afternoon Grandpa Thorne had said it. We were sitting in the sunroom of his lake house, a storm rolling in behind the glass. He'd leaned in, eyes distant but sharp. "One day they'll forget your blood," he murmured, "when they do remember who you are." At the time, I'd thought he was speaking in riddles. Now it rang with clarity like a prophecy. I made the call first thing Monday morning. Dr. Sienna Royce hadn't changed. Still brisk, brilliant, and borderline intimidating. She remembered me immediately. I didn't have to explain much. I just told her I needed to verify an old deed. We met that afternoon in her office, a room filled with soft light and hard truths. She read through the documents, silently flipping page by page with meticulous precision. Then she looked up. "It's valid," she said simply. "Clean transfer, no contestable clauses. You are the sole title holder of the property." I nodded, my hands cold in my lap. "If you choose to act," she continued, "you have full legal authority to serve notice. Eviction sale, repossession. It's all within your rights." I didn't respond right away. I stared at the copy of the deed on her desk. My name, their address, my future. "They don't know," I said finally. "They still think it's in probate, or under my grandfather's trust." Dr. Royce tilted her head. "Then perhaps it's time they found out." I could have signed the documents right then, could have pulled the trigger. But I didn't. Not because I was afraid those days were gone, but because revenge without precision is just noise. I didn't want noise. I wanted silence so loud they'd hear it in their bones. "I'll be in touch," I told her. She nodded, already sensing the kind of woman I was becoming. I left the office lighter, but not free. That would come later. For now, I walked home, with one thought pressing gently but firmly in the back of my mind. They want my money for a wedding. Let's see how they feel about losing their home. I didn't scream. I didn't storm in with declarations. That wasn't my style, and it certainly wasn't Grandpa Thorne's. He believed in the power of calm precision, and now so did I. Instead, I went to the boutique print shop 2 blocks from my office. I handed them the finalized wording and asked for exactly 1 envelope, gold-embossed, heavyweight, paper lined in slate gray. A single page inside a formal notice of change in property registration, citing updated legal ownership and upcoming compliance audit. It wasn't a threat. It was protocol. No demands, no accusations, just a quiet mirror held up to the truth. I mailed it on a Thursday morning. By Saturday evening, Sylvette was on the phone. She didn't greet me. "What is this?" she snapped. "This envelope. This ridiculous paper." I kept my voice steady. "It's about the house." "What about the house?" she hissed. "I own it," I said slowly, clearly. "Grandpa transferred it to me before he passed. Not to you, not to Dad, just me." There was silence on the other end. For the first time in a long while, I imagined her blinking, caught off guard not by confrontation, but by the absence of apology in my tone. "You wouldn't evict us," she said finally, her voice shrinking. "Would you?" I didn't answer right away. "Let the words hang. You've lived there 20 years, I said. I've lived under your thumb for just as long. Seems we're both overdue for change." "You're being cruel," she whispered. "Your father's health, our life. How can you do this?" I almost laughed. Almost. "You stood there while he hit me," I said. "You watched him humiliate me in front of everyone, and you said nothing." I heard her breath catch. "You taught me silence," I added. "I'm just applying the lesson." I ended the call before she could reply. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, the quiet wrapping around me like armor. Lysander came in and said nothing. He didn't need to. He simply placed a warm hand on my shoulder and left me to the silence I had earned. Because the next invitation I received wasn't a phone call or apology. It was Bastian's wedding. The invitation came in a thick envelope with silver trim. Formal. Obnoxious. Just like Bastian. I RSVP'd yes. Not because I wanted to celebrate him, God, no, but because I wanted him to see me. Wanted all of them to see me standing, untouched, unbothered, and sharper than ever. I wore an ivory pantsuit tailored within a millimeter of my breath. No lace, no soft pastels, just clean lines, confidence and defiance stitched into every seam. My cheek had long since healed, but the memory stayed beneath the surface like a scar under silk. The ceremony was excessive, a private estate, a string quartet, champagne fountains, and imported orchids. I moved through the reception like a ghost in reverse. Everyone saw me, but no one dared speak to me, except him. Bastian found me near the bar, flanked by groomsmen too tipsy to notice the tension in his smile. "Glad you could show your face," he said, swirling his drink. I smiled back slowly. "Didn't want you to think I was afraid." He chuckled, smug as ever. "You really made a scene at your engagement." Still milking that slap for sympathy, I didn't rise to it. I stepped closer, my voice low, smooth, quiet enough that only he could hear. "Enjoy the honeymoon," I said. "When you return, the house won't be there." He blinked, once. Then laughed loud and theatrical. "You're bluffing," he scoffed. "You wouldn't dare." But my eyes didn't blink. My breath didn't hitch. I just looked at him until the laughter in his throat dried up like dust. Then I walked away. I found Lysander by the garden, and we left early without saying goodbye. On the drive home, the silence between us was comfortable, charged with something neither of us needed to name. By Monday morning, the final documents were in motion, and by Thursday, a notice in red block letters was stapled to the front door of the home where I had once been raised. The red signs were impossible to ignore, bold, defiant, and nailed directly into the wood of the door I used to open after school, after heartbreak, after every moment when I thought family meant refuge. Property sold vacate within 14 days. They didn't call. They came. I saw them from the kitchen window first. Sylvette in her robe, hair, unbrushed lips trembling. My father beside her, not angry like usual, but red-faced in a way I hadn't seen before, desperate. I opened the door slowly, not out of compassion, but calculation. "You think this is fair?" he bellowed, voice cracking in a way that almost sounded like grief. "You think this is what your grandfather would have wanted?" "No," I said. "But neither was slapping your daughter in front of 60 people. Sylvette stepped forward, her hands wringing as if squeezing sympathy from thin air. "Leontine, we were upset. We made mistakes. But you're our daughter. You treated me like a transaction," I said. "And now, I've processed it." He opened his mouth again, but this time the words caught in his throat. I had never seen my father unsure of himself. Not once. Not until that moment. "Where will we go?" Sylvette asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. I didn't soften. I didn't remind her that she had once let me cry in silence because my pain had been inconvenient, that she had watched as my future was dismissed, reduced to background noise beneath Bastien's ambitions. "I'm not angry anymore," I said, "but I'm done giving pieces of myself to people who never noticed they were holding a knife." Lysander appeared behind me, one hand on the door frame, the other on my shoulder. No words, just presence. They didn't argue after that. They turned slowly, as if finally understanding the weight of everything they'd thrown away. I watched them walk back to the car, the back seat already packed with boxes. I didn't feel satisfaction, just quiet. A stillness I hadn't known in years. 2 days later, the letter arrived, handwritten, postmarked, and bearing my mother's familiar script. It arrived folded in 3 in an envelope I recognized immediately, creamy, floral scented, sealed with careful pride. Her handwriting hadn't changed, even the way she wrote my name. Sharp L curled to felt like a performance. I let it sit on the counter for 2 days. On the 3rd evening, I opened it. The words spilled in her usual rhythm, emotional but empty. No apology, no remorse, just implication accusation wrapped in maternal lace. "We raised you. We loved you. You've destroyed your own family out of spite. You sold our home, your home. And now your father's health is declining. You've made your point. Are you proud of yourself?" I read it once, then again, looking for something, anything that resembled the truth. But it wasn't there, not even close. There was no mention of the slap, no recognition of her silence, no acknowledgement of the years I'd been asked to shrink so Bastien could shine. Just guilt, just blame. That night, Lysander followed me out to the back patio where the fire pit still held the ashes from last winter's logs. I didn't say a word, just struck the match, held the letter to the flame, and let it curl, blacken, and disappear. Lysander placed the lighter back on the table and stood beside me as I watched the last of the script vanish in smoke. "I'm not proud," I said softly, "but I'm done being erased." He reached for my hand. I let him hold it. The silence between us was solid, not empty, but full of everything I'd never said and didn't need to anymore. The next morning, I returned to my desk and opened my inbox. Buried between appointment reminders and newsletters was a name I hadn't seen in years. Gregory Langford, the CEO of a consulting firm I'd interned for in college. His message was brief but precise. "Leontine, I've been following your work. I think it's time we talk." I stared at the screen, the last embers of my past still glowing behind my eyes. Then I picked up the phone. Gregory Langford's voice was calm, deliberate, with just enough warmth to cut through my disbelief. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly a decade, not since I was an intern fetching coffee and drafting floor plans no one looked at. But he remembered me. "I saw your housing equity articles," he said. "The community design you proposed in that symposium last fall, brilliant. Real-world architecture that serves dignity, not just function." I felt myself exhale slowly. "I want you to lead something," he continued. "We're expanding in Seattle, a new initiative, the Second Room Project. It's a transitional space for women who've been displaced, disowned, or pushed out by the people who were supposed to protect them. We need someone who understands what that looks like from the inside. For the first time in weeks, I didn't hesitate. I said yes before I even looked at Lysander. He didn't ask if I was sure. He just wrapped his arms around me that night and whispered, "It's time." We packed in quiet waves, box by box, memory by memory. I left behind the apartment I had built my healing in, but not the woman I had become there. Seattle greeted us with gray skies and clean slates. I poured myself into the project, shaping the space not as a shelter, but as a sanctuary. No cots, no shame. Each room held a door that locked from the inside. Each woman would have her own key. The name came to me late one night after reviewing floor plans under soft lamplight, the second room. The place after exile. The space we claim after being pushed out of the first. Lysander called it a rebirth. I called it proof. Because I wasn't rebuilding just for me anymore. I was building for every girl who'd ever been told to give everything and expect nothing. The gala came 3 months later, a room full of donors and city officials and strangers in suits who didn't know what it meant to lose your place at the table and build your own instead. I hadn't planned to go back. But when the project coordinator invited me to the ribbon cutting, I said yes before thinking twice. The air was different when I stepped out of the car, familiar but stripped of its weight. The street still curved the same way the mailboxes hadn't moved, but the house I once tiptoed through no longer existed. In its place stood scaffolding steel beams and freshly poured foundation. They'd bulldozed it clean. In a few months, a new building would stand there, tall, open, alive. Not a house, but a shelter, a haven for single mothers and women who had nowhere else to go. The irony settled deep in my bones. This place, the site of so much control and silence, would become a home for those finally learning to speak. I stood behind the podium, eyes scanning the small gathered crowd, architects, volunteers, donors, city officials. None of them knew the full story. Not really, but they didn't have to. They tried to steal my future. I said, my voice clear, steady. Now I help others rebuild theirs. I didn't elaborate. I didn't name names. The truth was already standing behind me, framed in steel and morning light. After the applause, I lingered near the edge of the lot, watching workers haul in materials, mapping out walls and doors that would hold far softer histories than mine. I thought about all the women who'd sleep here someday, all the ones who'd cry in private, then walk out stronger. I never saw Sylvette or my father again. Bastion faded into memory like a badly written chapter I no longer needed to edit. And that was enough. Justice didn't come with applause or a final scream. It came in the quiet, through the rustle of blueprints, the echo of voices finding refuge, and the knowledge that some legacies don't end in fire. They begin in concrete, and choice, and survival. I turned away from the sight keys to a different future already in my hand.